Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we bring you a dramatic and fast-developing story from the Mediterranean Sea. The Sumud Flotilla, a Gaza-bound convoy of international activists and humanitarian aid workers, has been seized by the Israeli Navy. The fate of the captured activists is now sparking outrage, shock, and widespread condemnation across the globe. This latest confrontation between Israel and activists attempting to break the Gaza blockade has once again put the world attention on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Israel's uncompromising security policies. Let's break down exactly what happened, what it means, and why the aftermath of this seizure could have far-reaching consequences. The Sumud Flotilla, named after the Arabic word for steadfastness, was made up of several vessels carrying medical supplies, food, and basic humanitarian items. Organizers of the convoy described their mission as peaceful, a symbolic act of resistance to what they call the illegal blockade of Gaza. On board were activists, doctors, journalists, and crew members from more than a dozen countries. The flotilla sailed under international banners, its organizers insisting that their only goal was to deliver aid and draw attention to the suffering of Gaza's 2 million residents. But from the very beginning, Israel had issued warnings. Any ship attempting to breach the blockade would be stopped. And that is exactly what happened. According to eyewitness reports, Israeli naval ships intercepted the flotilla in international waters. The operation was swift and forceful. Activists say armed commandos boarded the vessels under the cover of night, using helicopters and speedboats to surround the convoy. Within minutes, the crew and passengers were subdued, restrained, and their communications cut off. The activists broadcast desperate messages before their signals went dark. One chilling voice message recorded by an organizer said, "We are being surrounded. Israeli forces are coming on board. Please tell the world what is happening. Moments late, silenza." Israel's military later confirmed that the flotilla had been seized and escorted to the port of Ashdod. All passengers, they said, were being detained for questioning. Official statements claimed the operation was conducted without casualties, but eyewitnesses and activist families tell a different story, that some passengers were injured during the takeover and that their treatment remains uncertain. The fate of these captured activists has triggered shock and anger worldwide. Families are demanding proof of life. Human rights organizations are calling on Israel to release them immediately. Governments whose citizens were on board have lodged urgent diplomatic protests, asking for explanations and access to their nationals. In Turkey, large crowds gathered in protest, chanting slogans against the blockade. In London, Paris, and New York, solidarity demonstrations are already underway. Social media is ablaze with the hashtag #FreeTheFlotilla, as activists and supporters demand international intervention. For many observers, this feels like history repeating itself. The incident immediately drew comparisons to the 2010 Mavi Marmara raid, when Israeli forces killed 10 activists aboard a Turkish vessel. That event severely strained Israel's ties with Turkey and caused widespread diplomatic fallout. The Sumud Flotilla seizure risks reigniting that same storm, perhaps even on a larger scale, given today's fragile geopolitical climate. From Israel's perspective, however, the operation was necessary. Officials argue that the blockade is a matter of national security. They claim Hamas uses Gaza's ports and borders to smuggle weapons, missiles, and military technology. By intercepting the flotilla, Israel says it prevented a potential threat. Prime ministerial spokespeople have already stated, "No one is above the law. The blockade is legal, and no unauthorized ship will be allowed to enter Gaza waters." Yet critics argue that the blockade itself amounts to collective punishment. Gaza's economy is shattered, unemployment is sky-high, and hospitals are struggling with shortages of medicine. Humanitarian agencies warn that conditions in Gaza are worsening by the day. For them, the Sumud Flotilla was a symbol of solidarity, an attempt to break the isolation of Gaza's people. The question now is, what will happen to the detained activists? Past incidents suggest they may be deported after days of questioning, but uncertainty hangs in the air. Some governments have already warned Israel against mistreating their citizens. Others are preparing emergency diplomatic missions to secure their release. What makes this even more significant is the global reaction. The European Union has called an urgent meeting to discuss the incident. The United Nations has issued a statement expressing grave concern and reminding Israel of its obligations under international law. Regional powers like Turkey, Iran, and Qatar are already using the event to condemn Israel and rally support for Gaza. Meanwhile, in Gaza itself, people are waiting anxiously. Crowds gathered along the coast hoping to see the flotilla arrive. Instead, they're now watching footage of its seizure, their hopes crushed. Activists inside Gaza say the seizure proves once again how isolated the territory has become. Even peaceful ships carrying food and medicine cannot get through, one resident told international media. The symbolism of the Sumud Flotilla cannot be overstated. Sumud means steadfastness, resilience, endurance. By choosing that name, organizers wanted to highlight the unbroken spirit of Palestinians in Gaza. But with the flotilla now under Israeli control, many fear that message of steadfastness will be overshadowed by the images of activists detained and humiliated. Let's look at the possible scenarios ahead. Scenario 1. Quick deportation. Israel detains the activists for a short period, questions them, then deports them back to their countries of origin. This would likely calm tension somewhat, but still leave behind diplomatic scars and global criticism. Scenario 2. Prolonged detention. If Israel decides to hold the activists longer, charging them with attempting to breach security laws, the crisis could escalate dramatically. Protests would intensify, diplomatic relations would be strained, and pressure on Israel would mount. Scenario 3. Violent fallout. If evidence emerges of mistreatment, injuries, or worse, the world could witness a repeat of the Mavi Marmara backlash, with widespread condemnation, international inquiries, and possible sanctions. At this point, Israel seems to be calculating its options carefully. Officials are confident in their legal standing, but aware of the diplomatic storm brewing. The activists, meanwhile, are caught in limbo, pawns in a much larger geopolitical struggle. The seizure of the Sumud Flotilla also comes at a time of heightened regional instability. With ongoing conflict in the Middle East, shifting alliances, and fragile ceasefires, any spark could ignite wider unrest. Analysts warn that if Israel mishandles this situation, it could see protests not only abroad, but also in the occupied territories and among its own Arab citizens. The wider question is this: how long can the blockade of Gaza continue before international pressure forces a change? Each flotilla mission, each confrontation, pushes that question back into the global spotlight. The Sumud Flotilla may be stopped, but its impact is already echoing far beyond the Mediterranean. For now, the world waits. Families of the captured activists demand answers. Protesters march in solidarity. Governments debate their next steps. And in Gaza, 2 million people continue to live under blockade. Watching as yet another attempt to bring them relief is cut short. As we close today's report, one thing is clear. The fate of the captured activists has shocked the world, but the larger issue, the fate of Gaza itself, remains unresolved. The Sumud Flotilla may be seized, but the struggle it represents is far from over.